we are visiting the values of the Constitution of India. Let us put to ourselves this Constitution as a living being. Then what is the soul? Where is the soul of this living person? Constitution of India as a living apparatus. But where is the soul? Where we can locate the soul of this living being? To me, it looks that the life is to be lived in. The Constitution lives in the legislative powers, the way the inner apparatus of this setup is in action when it legislates, regulates, transforms, reveals, invents, rejuvenates, makes it in the new reality. This adaptation and this life of the Constitution as a living apparatus, a apparatus which is continuously conscious, the apparatus which adapts itself, the apparatus which comes in functional mode, how it had remained dormant in certain situations, why it has remained dormant in those particular situations, and what is the present status of the life of the constitutional apparatus. One way to look at is to enlist the set of laws as these were prior to 15th August 1947, then how it has been prior to 26th of January 1950. And then if we take 5 years duration for updating and for tabulating this set of laws under which the Constitution was marking its presence, the way the sovereignty of the Constitution was manifesting itself, the way the sovereignty of the Constitution was awaking, alarming, cautioning, implementing, coming in anger, coming in peace, having its reactions, and all that like a living person. Now, during these 75 years, the life of a living person and all those who were born during this period, those who have lived this period, those who have been witness to these periods, shall revisit this central core, the soul of this Constitution, which is having its marking, its contours, its frames as the legislative lists. Seventh schedule of the Constitution is the legislative lists. There are 3 lists. These 3 lists are union list. The list 1 is the union list. List 2 is the state list. And list 3 is the concurrent list. Now, let us start simultaneously visiting the initial 12 entries, heads of legislations vested with the Union Parliament, the state legislatures, and with the combined sovereign role for both as a concurrent list. At first glance, we will observe that the union list is all about the defense, the military, defense forces as such is the focus point of responsibility and duty of legislative organ. The parliament is vested with the total, exclusive, exhaustive dominion over this domain of the responsibilities. Defense, military, armed forces, and all connected aspects are vested with the parliament. And if we have a glance at state list, it will help us see as that police as comparison to military defense is the responsibility of the union. However, the policing as such has been made, the local governments as such has become the subject matter of responsibility and duty of the state. And if we simultaneously have a glance at the concurrent list, it will come to focus that the criminal law, including criminal procedure, including maintenance of the prisons, and transfer of properties, other than agriculture, land, registration, and deeds and documents. So, land transfer, other than the agriculture purposes, and the criminal law, criminal procedure, and maintenance of the prisons, etc. These connected aspects have come under the joint responsibility and duty of both union and the state. Now, let us pose to ourselves that if we had a chance to express whether this classification is having a justification or not, further, whether this classification requires revisit or not, and further, if this classification requires revisit, then according to each one of us, what precisely should be the changes in it. The second aspect which shall confront each one of us is that if we have the tabulation of the legislative history of India of these 75 years, then how far we feel that we have done justice to the exercise of these powers by the parliament in respect of the union list as well as in respect of the concurrent list. And further, as far as the states are concerned, whether the states in general and say Haryana in particular has justified its powers, responsibilities, and duties of legislative demarcation of the state list and of the concurrent list. Above this, the poser which we shall have for ourselves is that whether we are satisfied with the existing setup of laws or not. If we are not satisfied, then whether our dissatisfaction is with respect to the union list laws or state list laws or concurrent list laws. As liars, particularly as criminal liars, our focus naturally is to remain upon the concurrent list as the responsibility and duty of union as well as the state, both having equal sensitivity domains as far as the criminal justice is concerned. Our most of the voices at many times and even during each and every trial, or that this procedure, this setup, this apparatus, this functional reality is not as per the soul of the Constitution of India. We, the people of India, had given to ourselves. We had adopted this Constitution. We had enacted it, and we are following it for certain ideals which have been enunciated in the preamble itself, and then further in the form of the fundamental rights, state policy, and the fundamental duties. Therefore, the question which naturally arises is whether each one of us, particularly the law students, law scholars, law exponents, advocates, are giving proper attention, giving proper time, having proper evaluation of the existing setup of laws, and particularly whether we are sensitive as to the union, parliament, the state legislatures are doing their constitutional duty to exercise their powers to have legislative enactments to update the laws for to be parallel with the ideals of the Constitution. My one suggestion is that each one of us shall write a research paper with respect to at least one of the legislative domains, one of the legislative entries of these three lists. We all know that, as is in the news, at the union level, attempt is being made to visit the criminal law, substantive as well as the procedural, to reach at the new additions of Indian Penal Code and the Code of Criminal Procedure. Now, once this exercise is going to be there, is continuing, is being faced with respect to such a crucial aspect, such a crucial domain, then why it is not for each one of us to think seriously about these domains and to come up with the legislative provisions which, as per us, are in proper form. The form in which these provisions shall become a reality should be the suggestion which any one of us may put on record with the concerned authorities under the responsibility of performance of this exercise. Here, I have one another suggestion for each one of us, that once we are thinking of having new addition for our criminal procedure code as well as for the substantive law, and particularly of the procedural code, then let us sit comfortably and visit how this procedural law had its journey during last 150 years, beginning with 1857, coming up till 1947, then till 1973, and now in 2020. In these phases, how this procedure have changed, transformed, and is in the present state, then how we feel that still it requires a transition, transformation, and what those values should be. It is in this context that I would like that let us be through the judgment of Shahid-e-Azam Bhagat Singh of 7th October 1930, and in the context of the procedure of that trial, let us put ourselves in that place as an accused and to come forward with what should be the procedure, how the procedural distortions are to be contained, to be met, and how the supervisory judicial institutions shall exercise their powers. Do not remain silent spectators to the distortions having been caused in criminal procedural steps. Now, this procedure of this trial of 1930 will provide us enough intellectual food. It will give us enough intellectual thoughts as to how whatever may be the substantive laws, just or unjust, whatever one may have difference of opinions with respect to the substantive laws, that is one aspect. But whether the procedure to do justice as well is not becoming a grinding mill of injustice. Therefore, each one of us shall, on 7th of October 2020, have a revisit to the same, and the values emerging, the churning out in that context will certainly be a very blissful exercise. It will give us a complete satisfaction. And then we can also go to the National Force, Subhash Chandra Bose Force trials, and likewise we can come to the independent India's times of how the different criminal trials situations are looking at our face for an answer for many procedural distortions. We have come of an age, we are having living mechanism of the criminal law before our eyes, and let us have introspection. And this introspection will certainly give us more realistic insight. We may awake. Let us be alarmed that we have to live in awakened state. To remain in dormant state is not the feature and value of conscious living apparatus of our constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.